ghost.
I rest my weary bones on the cold slate floor. The aroma of death and decay floods my snout. There's a harsh mixture of agony, sorrow, and madness echoing all around me. This concerto of mystery would drive any man insane, but alas, I am too exhausted to care. My body is bruised and battered from the deranged cage fights I'm made to perform. Once a scholarly man who, through a series of misfortune, had contracted the dreaded moon curse, now savagely fights for his next meal. These stony walls have become a familiar sight. This castle once stood as a symbol of freedom, but now its halls are stained in sanguineous hues. I once revered a chance to tread upon these paths, but now I wish they would just disappear. We are slaves set to fight to death. I have killed many a foe, their lives forever etched in my soul, a burden I keep so they shall not be forgotten. All in the name of entertainment for the masses. People whom I thought civilized turned ravenous at the sight of bloodshed. It disgusts me right down to the core. The dreaded time that I'm not fighting off other cursed victims are spent daydreaming about my longing release. 'Tis been a long time since my cold, scarred flesh felt the warmth of the sun. I fantasize constantly of my opportune moment to strike. The cage handler would unlock my cell and remove my shackles. For the briefest of moments, the guards accompanying him would be distracted. Just for a second, that's all I would need. I would strike at them, tearing limb from limb, having already been taunted into the beast. I'd fell the guards without batting an eye, whilst the gluttonous lord who dares calls himself the master of freedom cowers in utter terror. Oh, how I'd love to see that piggy cry. Day in and day out, constantly mocking us all, jiggling his keys up and down the hall, his fat, sausage-like appendages gripping my salvation. The man was ghastly, putrid and vile, always pervertedly harassing the slender young, blue-haired woman across from my cage. That poor girl. Here I sit, whining like a child, when she is but one herself. I often pay her no mind, but these last few weeks have been rather harsh. Many a times I see her being dragged in and out of her cage, sometimes changed, but mainly not. What they do with her is beyond my knowledge, though my mind runs wild with disturbing thoughts. There are times she has returned with fresh bruises and blood. Once she even came in covered in candle wax. That poor girl. She used to cry and beg like the rest, but I feel she has accepted reality for what it has become. Curiously so, it bothers her none. For some time now she had been given a rose, possibly a gift from a fan. She stares into it intently, as one would a child. The gift must be of significant value, or perhaps it is her escape from this hellish pit. My thoughts are interrupted by the heavy bootsteps of the armed guards. It looks like it's time for me to go to work. The fat ball rolls towards me, his face greasy as always, with a smile I'd love to carve even wider. He unlocks the gate and signals them in. They come in fast with their silvery spears. They hold the tips up against my skin. By the gods, does it burn! But this dance I know all too well. The fat man changes my cuffs, and once I am secured, he breaks open the vial. I know not what this mixture contains, but the concoction fills me deep. A sudden rush of adrenaline, and the frenzy begins. My skin tears, my body twists. From the cocoon, a beast is unleashed. The pain is beyond that any person should be able to survive. We make our way out, the guards still holding weapons to me. We walk to the cage of the blue-haired girl. She smiles down to her flower, still in its prime. The fat man smacks her cage and begins his rant. She's oblivious to his words. For a moment, I envy her. His vulgarity and vocabulary are horrid, assaulting my ears. The man grabs his genitals and makes some disgusting remarks. He boasts himself up and tries to chuckle with the guards. They pay him no mind, looking somewhat irritated. The girls stay silent, never moving a muscle. The master, without provocation, grew angry at the girl. He grabbed the flower from her hand. She immediately began to shriek an unbearable wail. The man continued to agonize the girl, threatening to destroy her flower. The sorrow her eyes had broke my heart. Never had I seen something so heart-wrenching before. Something snapped deep from within me. A furious rage erupted, and I saw red. I broke through the iron that clasped me together. I took a spear right under a rib, but felt nothing but bloodlust as I ripped through the man's arm. The other turned to run, but I dug my claws deep into his spine. I began to pull and pull until it ripped right out. I turned to the man, now crying in fear, his pants soaked in urine. What a pitiful thing. I leaned in too close and sniffed at his flesh. Ugh! He was rancid and foul. I contemplated whether or not I would bite, but instead I grabbed his throat and ripped it right out. His eyes faded in the most joyous of ways. The cages around me erupted in cheer, the howls of others honoring me for what I had done. I picked up the flower, which was slightly bruised, and handed it to the young woman. Her cries had subsided, and now she wore a smile. I removed her lock and pointed to the windows. She paid me no mind, and was enchanted by her treasure returned. I could hear the drumming of guards coming to slay me. I pulled the flower from her hand and ran to the exit. She followed quickly. Damned, the girl was fast. She had an anger about her that could rival my own. I waited for the right moment. I threw the flower up. The girl had caught it and crashed right through the panes. She landed just outside the castle walls, safe and sound. Her gaze no longer to the flower, but was now on me. I pointed to a meadow far, far from here, and shouted roses, but it came out in a bark. For the briefest of moments she gave me a whimper. Just as I was about to go free, the searing pain of multiple blades drove deep into my back. I roared in pain and gave out a cry. I gave her a look and she understood me well. She turned away and began to run. She looked back at me once. Her eyes spoke volumes, but only one thing stood out from the rest. She was free. Free to frolic amongst the roses. Here I was, a man who never gave a damn, now lay dying thinking about someone I had never known before. I gave up my chance to be free for a blue-haired young lady who had nothing but love for a flower. A cracked smile now forming on my fading face, just thinking about how happy she would be.